We will get going. Okay. So now we are live on Facebook, and you can probably see, you can tell if anybody gets in here. So if anybody is going to come on here to watch, welcome to this interview. I am interviewing Rick Ornelas, and he is going to share his amazing stories, and he is an author. And if you guys have any questions for myself or for Rick, you guys are more than welcome to put them in the comments. However, I am going to wait for the interview to be over before I do ask him any kind of questions, but you guys are more than welcome to. He is a wealth of knowledge. So we will just go ahead and get started. So, hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Bright Side of Life. I am your host, Melissa Bright, and I am very excited for today's episode as my guest is the true embodiment of living life on the bright side. Today, I am talking with Rick Ornelas, and Rick is an author and positive change expert who teaches men and women to unlock their amazing potential to create an incredible future and change the world around them. He's the author of the best-selling book, 12 Hours of Heaven, Lessons for a Better World, and founder of I Spark Change, which this movement and community of those making the world a better place has grown over 800% in recent months. And their mission is to spread positive change throughout the world by living the golden rule in all they do and leading by example. Rick, thank you for taking your time for being here today. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, Melissa, and thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, absolutely. So before we go ahead and get into all your books and everything, I know that you personally have gone through some major life-changing moments, from a near-death car accident to being laid off in 2020. So I know, this is kind of the way I feel, but sometimes I feel when I hear about people's accolades, their accomplishments, their successes, much like yours, I sometimes feel like you and I can be so far removed from each other. And you have had all this success, and that's what I strive for. And that's why I feel that it is so important that you come on here to share your story, not only of your success, but also things that you have personally went through, that you have also had hard times. And this is because I want to encourage my listeners to think about that. So as you listen to Rick's story, he's not so different than you and I. And this is really why I want to hear his story, because I've always been fascinated by how people get from where they were to where they are now. So with that being said, Rick, can you share some of the events and times that have happened in your life that have been extremely difficult for you? And how did those affect you and your mindset long term? I know some events we can usually get over rather quickly, and some of us just impact us for the rest of our lives. So do you mind sharing with us some of those events that you experienced?
Yeah, first off, I want to say, Melissa, I love the way you framed that, because we're all just a product of the events that we're all made up of all the events that we've had throughout our lives, and the stories of what's happened to us are what really connect us to one another. I mean, that's the essence of history. If you go back all the way, as far as recorded history, it's just all the stories of what's happened. And like you said, I'm no different from anyone else. I'm just someone who's sharing my story right now, and who has written about it and is trying to share it to inspire others. But like you said, I have had many tragedies in my life. The most recent one being last year, exactly a year ago at this time, when a lot of us were heading into those uncertain times. We were heading into quarantine and shutdown, and the world was just full of uncertainty, and we didn't know what was going on. And that's where I found myself going into an anxious and depressed place. And my business had slowed down substantially. I was laid. A couple of my clients had said they need to stop their services. And so I was essentially laid off from one of them, and others had stopped their services completely. And I didn't like where I was headed. I didn't like that I was going into a place that is not comfortable for me, because I'm typically a very positive person and very look for the opportunity and everything. And I wasn't doing that.
Right.
And I didn't want to be the person that, sat on the couch all pandemic, watching 20 episodes of different shows on Netflix, right? I wanted
Right.
to do something. And that, in that time, it really had me reflecting on what was important. And I wrote a blog entitled How to Have a Successful COVID-19 Quarantine, how to use it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And it was all about just that, about being grateful for what you have and using it as an opportunity. And in writing that, it reminded me of a goal that I had from years ago, and that was to write a book that had been in my head for 20 years. But before I talk about the book, I'll share the experience of, because as you mentioned, tragedies. I mean, that was the experience that essentially started all this. Now, I didn't know 20 years ago that it would have led to what it did now,
Right.
or last year. But the story is that when I was still living in Southern California at the time, and my wife and my two young daughters were in the car, and I have three now, but at the time just had two, and they were 1 and 4 years old. So they're very little. And we were driving back from Los Angeles from a birthday party, and it was getting late, and the kids were tired, they were asleep, and we wanted to get home before it got dark, and it started pouring like it never does in Southern California. And it was raining to the point where the wipers can't clear the water off the windshield. Right. I'm used to that in Texas now, but back then in California, it's something you're never used to. Right. But it was such powerful rain that many cars had pulled over, and they had just stopped. They weren't even driving, but we wanted to keep going on because, again, we wanted to get home before it got late. So we decided to continue on just very slowly and cautiously. Well, unfortunately, I hit a pocket of water on the road and started hydroplaning, and the vehicle started spinning out of control, and we were in the slow lane, and we spun across 4 lanes, didn't hit any of the cars, nearly hit the center divider. And, I'm screaming, my wife's screaming, I'm trying to correct the situation.
Right.
And we end up spinning the opposite direction across 4 lanes the other way. And at this point, I'm completely out of control and just wondering, what's going to happen, and just praying that my family will be safe.
Right.
And we go off the road, up a dirt embankment, and we hit a cinder block wall at high velocity, and we flip completely over, and we land back on the wheels. And for a moment, you kind of pause, and then I realized the windshield is shattered, and the whole hood is everything's smushed down, and the right side, the windows are shattered, and the right side smashed, and the car's filled with dirt from flipping over, I guess. And I look over at my wife, and then my daughters are crying, and so I realize, and I don't know if they're okay. And we managed to get out of the vehicle, and we're all completely unharmed. I mean, there's not a scratch. I mean, right. Even the impact on my wife, she was a little sore on her shoulder, but we didn't have a scratch on us, even with all the broken glass and everything. And a car had pulled over with an elderly couple, and the lady had wrapped a blanket around my wife because it was still pouring rain. And I was talking to the gentleman, and he said, "That was the most incredible thing we've ever seen. We can't believe that you got out, that you got out." And they had called the paramedics, and that was, a very tragic event. But the beauty in it is that it caused me to reflect on my life at that time.
Right.
And I realized, shortly after that, I was given a second chance, and more importantly, that my family was alive, and that, nothing tragic happened to them, on my hands, right? Under my responsibility. And I ended up writing a to-do list for myself of things that I wanted to live by, like being present and cherishing my family and treating others the way I would want them to be treated. And that was the foundation for my book that just didn't get written until 20 years later.
Right. And I'm so happy that everyone's okay. So let me ask you this, because I didn't ask you this. before being an author, obviously, because you wrote your book last year, and being a positive change expert, what were you doing? Were you doing that before COVID, or no? What were you doing before COVID?
So I've had a coaching business coaching, specifically for doctors. It's strategic medical coaching is the name, but it's specifically for doctors, coaching them on leadership and communication and mindset, and so somewhat related. I mean,
Okay,
still helping others and working to improve others.
right.
But that was the business that slowed down. That was the business that was put on hold, like with everything else.
Yep.
And and that's when I decided to write, because I suddenly had all this time on my hands and wanted to use it as an opportunity.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing because the same happened for me last year. I was a travel agent, and travel, I mean, came to a screeching halt. There was not anybody traveling, and it was a very humbling thing for me. I think I did fall into some really dark depression, but I finally asked myself, I think this was like June or July, and I asked myself, like, Melissa, what makes your heart hurt? And whatever that answer is, how can you do that to make the world a better place, and what can you do about it? And the answer was, it hurt my heart when people felt alone in their struggles and whatever they were going through, because even though I had my daughter and my boyfriend, there was still something going on with me. And that's how this whole podcast came to be, was because of the pandemic, essentially. And it's so, as much as last year was really, really hard on people, I feel like it almost got us out of this like comfort zone to really make us almost start reflecting and thinking, is there something else I need to be doing? And like you said, you obviously wrote a book during the pandemic. So you used your time quite efficiently.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I'm so glad that you shared that, because I mean, I believe the same thing. I mean,
Mhm.
100%, Melissa. I believe that it was kind of a great awakening for a lot of people.
Yep.
And that's the beautiful thing that's come out of it. The lemonade out of the lemons, if you will.
Yeah.
That for a lot of us, that we were able to do that, and that's why I'm trying to impart that on others,
Yeah.
and show them that there is opportunity, that they can reach that dream, that they can do things that they have never done before, and get out
Yeah.
of that comfort zone.
Yep. Exactly. So, okay. And do you feel that the event, that your car accident, besides what we know now and how the book came out of it, but how else did it change your life and what you had planned for your life? Do you feel that one single event would kind of change the trajectory, even if it was that, like you said, you became more aware, you became more present, you made these lists? Do you feel that you would have done something different had that car accident not happened?
It's hard to say. I mean, I like the Steve Jobs quote that you can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect them, going
Mm,
backwards. Um, but I know I can speak for my experiences, that I do know this. I do know that um, I I grew up. I was raised that family is extremely important. It's
mhm.
the most important part of our lives is our family, and that's what my parents imparted in myself and my sisters. And so I knew that, but at that point in my life, I was young and I was selfish, and I had young children, and I was still getting used to being a father, and still getting used to being selfless,
Yep.
the selfless nature of being a parent, right?
Mhm.
And I really think that's the big lesson that the accident taught me, is that I was learning, I guess, after, when you first have your first child, you learn, okay, now it's not all about me, right? Now it's about someone else that I have to care for in
Right.
the world. And so I know I had that in me, but it really amplified that in my mind, that look, they are number one priority no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've grown in and continue to grow in, to this day, that, they always come first.
Right. And that's exactly the silver lining in it all. You know,
Mhm.
it could have taken you, like you said, you were a younger father or whatever, and that could have taken you 2, 3, 4 years maybe to like really grow into the fatherhood and being selfless, where this kind of catapulted, and it's like, whoa, this is what just I could have lost all of this in an instant, and I didn't. So I think that's amazing how that definitely transformed you and opened your eyes to that. So that's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll add one more thing that I haven't really shared with others, but I think it's appropriate based on what you've asked, Melissa.
Mhm.
Is that just a short time after that, just a few years after that, my sister passed away,
Mm.
and I'm the youngest of four. But one of my sisters, my sister Linda, passed away, and she when she died, she passed away with two infant children.
Oh,
So they were, one and essentially 1.5. They're 11 months apart, my niece and
mhm.
nephew. And, you know, when you add my accident along with what happened with her, those two combined really, helped me to see like, oh my gosh, life is so precious. Life is so short. And, these children are so important, and you have to do everything you can to take care of them. And number one, and then also the precious nature of life.
Yeah. Do you feel with those 2 events happening so close back to back, was there anything in your mind that did go to the negative? Like, you asked, like, "Why me?" Because it's very easy when those kinds of things happen to I feel at least, to get in kind of that victim mode and feel like you're just going to be dealt a bad hand for, like, why did this have to happen to me? Why did I have to lose my sister? Cuz I've lost my mom when I was 25, and I went through that victim mode for a very long time. Not even realizing it, cuz you don't always realize it, but it was really really hard. I was like, I did feel sorry for myself. So did you ever experience any of that?
Yeah, I did. I did, and it didn't. I mean, I remember going and seeing my primary care doctor, and he was essentially about to diagnose me as being clinically depressed at for a short time after.
Mhm.
And I think actually that experience of going to him and have him, he's about to give me this label of, oh yeah, you're depressed, right? You're
Right.
depressed because of what happened and everything. I think that was almost like another wake up call. That was like something that said, look, there's no way you can go down that path because of my kids,
Right.
because I saw my niece and nephew, and I saw my own small children, and I was like, there's no way that this can happen.
Yeah.
By that time we had a third. I had another little one.
Right.
And and so it's just those collections of experiences. And I honestly, Melissa, I'd never even again connected the dots and even realized that until you would just ask that question,
Yeah.
that that had such an impact at that time.
Right. It's sometimes crazy, like, people will ask questions, and if you haven't ever really maybe thought of it that way or never been asked it that way, it can kind of spark that, which I love, because I'm a big reflection person because I need to be. I have lots of things. But all right, we will go ahead and move on. So I have been intrigued to ask you this since we talked, and I still truly don't know. So, you are called a positive change expert, and can you tell me what exactly that means and how you help people by that?
I love that you asked this, because it's something that people are always curious about. And the funny thing is, or the real truth behind it, is that it was someone like yourself on another podcast who dubbed me that. And it was early on, when my book had first come out, that he dubbed me this. And the way he phrased it, so I'll share the way he phrased it, is as I was sharing what I was doing with
Hmm.
iSpark Change, and
Hmm.
as I was sharing what I was trying to accomplish and my vision for everything and the positive change that I was spreading, he said, "You're a positive change expert." And I was like, oh, okay,
Let me jot
I
that
guess.
down.
And then, yeah, I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna write that down. And then as others started saying similar things,
Mhm.
and so I was like, hey, I'm gonna run with that. I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah.
Um, but the truth is that anyone can be a positive change expert. I firmly believe that, and it's just a matter of making the commitment to look for, like you said, the silver lining earlier, to
Mhm.
look for that silver lining in everything that you do, and just in your daily life.
Yeah.
Um, and if people want to call me that, hey, that's great. That's fine. Um,
You could be
I,
called worse.
yeah, I could, and I know I have. I just hope, I'd love to have an army of positive change experts, right? That there's people all over the world that are doing this, and I'm sure there are people, and I'm trying to seek them out.
Right.
But I'd love to find more folks like that.
Yeah. And so you had mentioned about the ice spark change. And so let's talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to go back to more of your you being that expert. But I would love to hear about how this came to be and what is this and all of that great stuff.
It's really interesting because a couple times in our conversation you've already talked about things getting sparked, or having like some new idea or something, sparking change. And when I was writing my book last year,
Mhm.
I started almost exactly a year ago at the beginning of April, first or second week of April. And when I hit the beginning of June, um, I started getting so spiritually connected, and as I felt, divinely inspired,
Mhm.
that I started my writing flourished. I went from writing 750 or 1,000 words in a day to writing over 2,000 in a couple hours, and I was just in what people call like that flow state, where just the words were pouring out of me, and as I said, I felt like I wasn't writing the story, like it was just being given to me. Um, and as I went in that time that lasted for about a month, um, I started having dreams and visions and all sorts of um, ideas for a brighter future, for a better future, for the brighter side of life, if you will, forgive the pun. But and that's where the idea for I Spark Change came, because it's a theme that's used throughout my book, 12 Hours of Heaven.
Mhm.
And it's also what I felt I was being called to create. I felt this really deep calling that I wasn't just supposed to write a book, that I was needed to do more, and I needed to help more people and
Yeah.
spread that positive change, become an expert in
Yeah.
positive change and really spread that. And right after, I finished writing, and around the time my book was published, that's when I created the I Spark Change group and movement to start spreading that positivity and change.
Yeah. And so what kind of things do you do? So if somebody would join, what kind of things do you guys do? Do you guys go help people? I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, yeah, of course. The whole thing that I want I Spark Change to be about, and that it's is becoming, the vision is a community of those who want to spread positive change. Now, plain and simple. Now, that's up to the interpretation of the individual. So,
Yep.
for one person, it may mean doing charitable work, right?
Mhm.
As we were luckily introduced by an organization that we partnered with, the July 8th Project, on doing some Meals on Wheels work. So now we've been doing that. We've been doing
Right.
some Meals on Wheels deliveries, and that's fantastic. For others, maybe that's not their thing, right?
Mhm.
Maybe their thing is they want to just go throughout their day being nice to strangers and smiling to strangers, and kind of spreading the love that way. I mean, that's fine. It's really, I really don't want to, like I say, living the golden rule, that do unto others, right? That kind
Mhm.
of that keeps it pretty simple, right? And it's,
Yep.
most people are going to act positively if they are acting that way.
Yep.
um, but to further answer your question, in terms of the community and like on social media and everything, there's affirmations, there's positivity, there's scripture, there's different videos with tips on how to be more positive or have more optimism in your life. Or today there was one on reducing stress because it's
Yeah.
Stress Awareness Month. So things like that. And what I'm really encouraging the community to do now is for others to share the ways that they're sparking change, and to continue to share videos, share posts, share comments to keep letting others know what they're doing to spark
Right.
change in their life.
Yeah, I love it. And so, since you are in Texas, can anybody join from anywhere in the world to do whatever if they want to be part of iSpark Change?
Yes, absolutely, Melissa. So there's a Facebook community that's just, you type in the letter I, Spark Change on Facebook, and you'll find it. And then there's a website, which is isparkchange.com. But the whole point of creating iSpark Change, one of the visions I had of this brighter future was that iSpark Change is it's just phase one. It's just the early phase of what I'm trying to create. Well, I should say we're trying to create is that what I see it evolving into is a global community of individuals, groups, organizations, charities, companies, it doesn't matter, just all types of people that are
Right.
spreading positive change through
Yeah.
their work, through their lives, through their hobbies, through their endeavors. And I'm another thing that we're working on is morphing it into the world's first social media platform that is that exact global network that is connecting individuals that are doing all those positive things.
That's amazing. That is so awesome. And I'm intrigued because I was checking out the website and I was like, "Oh, if it can be anybody anywhere, then I might have to sign up." And so I'm going to look further into it after that.
Yeah, I would love it if you would sign up and share. I mean, even like your
Yeah.
podcast, for example, Melissa, even your podcast, that you're giving people a chance to amplify their voice, or just what
Yep.
your podcast is all about, right?
Yep.
The brighter side of life. I mean, that in itself speaks to positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the whole expert, the positive expert thing. And do you feel that you have always been a positive person? And if the answer is yes, do you feel that you sometimes still struggle? Because I feel that we can't be happy all the time. So do you still struggle daily? Or have you always been a pretty optimistic, positive, what have you person?
I'd say the answer to that question is both. So, yes, I've always been a positive person. I think that's how I was raised. I was raised with that growth mindset
Mm-hmm.
of looking at the bright side.
Yeah.
To answer the second question is that I think we all struggle with that, myself included, because things are going to happen in your day. Tragedies are going to happen in our lives, like we've discussed earlier.
Right.
And we're all going to get down. We're all going to struggle and need help. And I think the biggest difference between what I'm trying to accomplish and maybe some others that struggle with it is that I don't stay in that place for very long. That
Right.
I'm constantly looking for the opportunity, and that's what I teach others, and that's what I coach others, is to constantly be looking for that opportunity, and that can quickly get you out of that negative mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Use a technique called positive reframing, where you look for the positive in any situation, and it's a good tool to help you get away from that. But that's what I do. That's what works for me.
Right.
And a lot of others. And I think the other thing is looking for the opportunity, and the other aspect of it that can help is getting help, is seeking to share what you're going through with others, is to know that you're not alone.
Right.
And so many folks that are going through something, they think that they're all alone in their struggle. And as we said at the beginning, it's our stories that connect us all. We're all connected in those ways, and it's the challenges and the struggles that are what really connect us, not the the great happy times. It's all the
Yeah.
difficult times.
Right. And that's that really is like when I asked myself the question of like what makes my heart hurt and all these things, I would see successful people and I'm like, man, what did they do? Why do I feel like I am so far away from these people? Like I could never be or a Rick Ornelas. And if I would like have met you in person, I don't like surface level conversations. I if you would have said like, oh, I lost my sister however long ago. As soon as you would say something like that would show any type of vulnerability, now we can have a real conversation. Now I'm
Mhm.
like, not that I wouldn't be listening to, other things, but now we have connected on another level in terms of like, oh, I lost a parent or whatever. We've lost somebody close to us. And those are the things that I like you said, those stories and those hardships. And those are the things that truly connect us. And as much as we think sometimes that we're so different from other people, I'm starting to realize how much more alike we are than we realize. And that it's very, very comforting to know that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's so true. It's so true. And the unfortunate thing is, we're at the most connected time in history with the internet and social media and everything, but we're also at the most disconnected time
Right.
because that has led people to not have to communicate the way you're describing, right? To not have
Yep.
to have those intimate conversations that really connect us. And a lot of people communicate just on that superficial level.
Yep.
And so they never really connect exactly, like you were
Yeah.
saying. And the other part of it is that so many people live in fear. Part of that connectedness and having our lives be so public
Hmm.
is that people are constantly afraid, and I don't mean to just generalize, but a lot of
Right.
people are constantly afraid of being judged,
Yep.
by others, because it's all visible right there on the screen.
Right.
And so they don't want to share their vulnerability. They don't want to let that out into the
Hmm.
world, because they're afraid of, if there's going to be people making hateful comments and all these things. And unfortunately, there are people in the world that will do that, but there are far more people that will be supportive and that will embrace that
Yep.
individual for, being vulnerable.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what I've started saying, that vulnerability is my superpower, because when I started my podcast and I said I'm going to do it the right way, and when I post and when I say anything, it is going to come from my true self, and people to know that, I struggle with mental health, with depression, with anxiety, so on and so forth. The list is very long. But and that's what connects people to people is, oh my gosh, Melissa, I didn't know you struggle with anxiety, so do I. And what you just posted, I feel like that just spoke to me. I feel like you were in my head. And that is going to be much more beneficial to somebody than me posting about some superficial thing that somebody could potentially be jealous of. Or I don't want that. That's not what
Hmm.
I'm trying to do. And so that was definitely my goal. Because before that, I was really struggling with depression. I would post so superficial things because I didn't want to talk about that. And then I somewhere had a switch, and I'm like, nope, this is what's going to happen. And it's been a lot better. If nobody thankfully has said anything bad, but it's not always easy to put your stuff out there
Yeah.
necessarily. So
Yeah, very true. And it's a credit to you, because I'm sure that's had a positive effect on your podcast and on others, whether you realize it or not. I'm sure it has.
yeah, and that's the goal right there.
Mhm.
Okay, so now would you so you are positive change expert, but you do coaching, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to make sure I didn't mess this up. Okay, I didn't. When a client comes to you, is there a common theme that you notice in people, that what could potentially be holding them back from their full potential? Or is every person a unique story?
Again, I'd have to answer that it's a little of both. It's a little of both. At least that's what I found, is that oftentimes it's both. I'd say the commonality that I've seen in clients I've worked with is that a lack of belief in themselves, or a lack of belief in their ability. And you even alluded to that yourself earlier, when you were saying comparing yourself to,
Yep.
to someone else. And that constant comparison, which is very easy to do today, may be what the culprit is, but it may be something else from childhood or whatever. But a lot of times it's that lack of belief that they can accomplish that next thing, or they can be that person that they want to be, or have the success that they're looking for. So that's the first part, is that is, I'd say, probably evident 99% of the time.
Yep.
Okay. And then the second part is a fear to take action, which stems from the first one.
Yep.
Right. So not believing leads the inaction to go to that next step that would get them to the place that they want to be. So a lot of people get paralyzed by that fear, and they either don't know what that next step is when it's, really apparent to someone from the outside looking in, like me, and it's like, oh, you just need to do this. And like, wow, I didn't even think about that, when, it's just so plainly obvious to someone. But because they don't have that belief, because they have that fear that they can't accomplish that, they're blinded by that. And so they don't take action. And I say, the belief and the action, those are the two common threads that I see a lot.
Yeah. Like you just described me. That was exactly like before. And I've done a lot of like work in the past, I would say, year, but it was that I, first of all, didn't believe, one, that I was worthy enough of success. There was a lot of stuff there. And then two, like the fear and not taking action. So if I don't believe that I'm worthy of it, then why would I ever go and even try, and there took a lot of work to get past that. So with that being said, I'm assuming that you have probably had clients of all that come from different backgrounds, from different stories, and people do often go through unimaginable things like losing loved ones, what have you. And for them, seeing good in life almost seems impossible. So do you have a story of one of your clients that you wouldn't mind sharing, one of their transformation stories, to show that it is possible to get through hard times, mental blocks, whatever was stopping them from their full potential and greatness?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is a young female who was early in her career. She was, and I don't want to give too much away, but she's early in her career, and she was struggling to kind of find her career identity in the profession that she was in helping others. And it really stemmed from that belief. It really stemmed from the belief in, she had this real big desire, like, oh, I want to accomplish this and I want to be great. And she just did not believe herself. And still to this day, she struggles with that a little bit, but she's come, so far from where she was. But it led, what it was leading to, it was leading to her sabotaging different things.
Yep.
So, self-sabotage to where she, got a new position and was working, was doing great for a little while. And then she kind of sabotaged that because she didn't believe it. And that was affecting her family life. She had two kids, and one was a new baby, right? So she had just had a baby. And so she was depressed after that, and all the challenges that come with having a second child, and marriage wasn't doing well. And she was just really disconnected from who she was, I guess is the best way to put it. And we helped her to essentially find her identity. Is the best way to explain, is where we got to, is that she found her true identity, and she believes in that identity. And now she's moved on, working somewhere else, has been flourishing, has been promoted multiple times, and is flourishing in her position. And she's even doing a challenge with her health, that she's about to compete in something, and is doing phenomenally well.
Yeah.
And, I'm really, really proud of her, and how far that she's come.
Yeah, and I'm sure as her coach, it's amazing to watch that and see that happen. And I just want to go back to self-sabotaging. There was a book that I read, well, I listened to, um, and now I can't. Well, I can, but it's a bad word. But the book "Unf Yourself,"
Oh, yeah.
and that was one of the most eye-opening books because they talk about self-sabotaging, and if you think you're basically it's like if you think whatever you think you can make it happen, and that could be either positive or bad. So if she
Mhm.
thought that she wasn't, let's say she wasn't qualified for that position, well then she's going to go somehow self-sabotage that and then come back and say, see, I told you I
Yeah.
wasn't qualified. So that fits exactly where she thought. I've been there, done that too.
Yeah. It's that self-fulfilling prophecy that,
Yep.
that reinforces that belief. And Henry Ford is credited with saying, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yep.
Confucius actually said it like thousands of years before him in a different form. Um, and it's been, said by many other famous people, but, great people in history. But that's really true. It's very, very true, because our brains, our minds are essentially, they're like a computer. Whatever programming you feed it, that's the programming it's going to run with. So
Yep.
if you feed that self-sabotage, everything, it's going to keep going that way. It's going to keep running, that programming until
Yep.
you decide or are taught or, led to program it a different way. And then you'll start to have different outcomes.
Yeah. And sometimes I hate, and I say this so much, like the cliche sayings, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. But unfortunately, it's no more simple than that. It's literally the truth.
Yeah, it is. It's very true. I know my kids, that's one of the sayings, that my kids probably hate for me saying it so much, but
I know, but eventually it's the time when it like really happens and they do something that like, Dad, I thought I could and I actually did it, and then they're going to be like, okay, now I see why Dad's been saying this for years. So,
no, yeah. I mean, from the time they were young, I've told them I never wanted to hear them say I can't. Oh, I can't do it. I can't do this. And I was like, no, you're just still learning how to do, whatever it is. I can't write about. No, you're just learning
yep.
how to write it, and you're not there yet. You just have to
Yeah,
put in the work, and then you'll get there.
exactly. I love it. Okay. So let me find out where I am very quickly. And okay. So, what is one of the first things that you do whenever you do with your client when they hire you for, let's say, the coaching or the positive change expert? What is one of the like what is your first session like with them? I'm so curious about this, by the way.
it, it, it's it's going to sound, really simple, but I want to find out everything about them. So in my notes, I call it a needs and discovery analysis. It sounds so official, but all it is I'm really just finding out about them. The number one question I always ask is, I say, why did you contact me? Why are we here? Why do you want
Ooh,
to, to meet with me? Why do you need help? And usually I get a very superficial answer, and then I have to dig with, 4, 5, 6, 8 other questions to really dig. But
right.
I want to find that deep why,
Mm-hmm.
because the why is never as simple as that first knee jerk response. It's always fundamentally way, 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 way deeper than that.
Yep.
It's not, the why may be, like, we'll use this person I discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The initial why is, oh, I need help with my job, but that wasn't her why. I mean, that, as we discussed, I mean, that was not her why at all. Sure,
Right.
that's what she thought,
Mm-hmm.
but once we started digging, we realized it went far deeper than that.
Yep.
And so I essentially want to find out, what's brought them to my doorstep, so to speak, and then I want to find out, what their goals are. What do they want to accomplish by going through coaching, or whatever they want to work on.
Right.
Um, where do they want to be? Where if they could just wave a magic wand, where do they want to be?
Yeah.
Um, and there's a series of other questions that I'll ask them in there, but they're all basically centered around those two areas, kind
Yeah.
of where they are now and where they want to get to. And then in there, we start figuring out what the roadblocks are, what's standing in their way, what challenges we're going to have, what things we're going to need to unpack. But the reality is, at least what I found, Melissa, is that most people, and I'll include myself in this statement, is that most of us are kind of living here when we could be living way, way up here, like even higher than I can reach out of the screen,
Mm-hmm.
of what you see me
Right.
reaching, for whatever reason, right? Either the choices we've made, the beliefs we have in ourselves, or we don't know how to get there, or whatever it is.
Right.
And and I mean, it it says it says in scripture, and there's plenty of other sources that say that we were meant to live abundant and beautiful lives and be the best version of ourselves. And that's what I'm hoping everybody can accomplish.
Yeah. Do you feel that when people come to you, have there ever been instances, because the first question that you said is like so astounding, but then again, not like that seems the obvious one, like, why are you here? But have you ever had somebody say, like, I don't even know why I'm here? Like, that's a really good question, because I feel like sometimes people don't ask themselves these questions until you just asked them the question and they're like, oh, I've never thought about that. Now obviously if they're going to hire you, they have some kind of idea, but like you said, they always have that superficial answer, and then
Mm-hmm.
usually way further down the road they come to a different answer. And I think it's amazing that you do that to help people, because sometimes people just don't ask themselves, and they do unfortunately stay in the same place for most of their lives. But
Yeah.
they are um, destined for greatness. They could have done it, but so I like the thought provoking questions that you ask.
Yeah. Thank you. And I found, just to respond to what you were saying, I found that, along with that superficial answer, sometimes people need help in figuring that out. So,
Exactly.
they may not always say, I don't know. They may usually they answer like the superficial answer because
Yeah.
they think that's what it is. But oftentimes they really need help in figuring it out. And that's where, the additional questions in the conversation, and, getting to that vulnerable place where they can really figure out, what they need,
Right.
help with. And, myself, I mean, I had to go through a process to figure that out as well.
Right.
And, I think this is part of the journey for a lot of us.
Right. And that's kind of with the question that I asked myself. And I actually heard that on somebody else's podcast. Was she had said how she found her purpose, and she said, I asked myself what made my heart hurt, and I thought about it, and then I came up with that answer. And then the next question is, okay, so what is happening in the world that makes my heart hurt? And now how do I go and change that? And that she made it that simple. She's like, that's how I found out my purpose. And when she worded it that way, it like became so simple to me. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, I know what makes my heart hurt, and I know how I want to change it. And so I just love that, because I'm all about self reflection and asking questions. So
I like
thank
that
you.
question. I might have to borrow that question and use that
I
with
I
folks.
know,
What makes
and
your heart hurt?
I wish I knew. So it's the lady from Will and Grace, the redhead from Will and Grace. It was
Mm-hmm.
her and her business partner. And so I don't know which one said it. I don't know if it was her or the other lady, but she
Mm-hmm.
said it on Jay Shetty's On Purpose podcast. And I listened to
Oh,
it and I was like,
wow.
this is the most simple thing ever. Is it really this simple? It it was for me. So anyways, we
Sometimes it
will.
is. Sometimes it is that simple.
I
We just have
know.
to figure it out.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So now we're going to switch gears, and now we are going to finally get to your book that you wrote last year. And you wrote a book called 12 Hours of Heaven. Can you explain what inspired you to write the book and what it's about?
As far as the inspiration, and thank you for bringing it back to the book,
Yeah.
Melissa. But as because that's what really started this journey, a year ago. But as far as the inspiration it's twofold. The first was, and this is one of those connect the dots, stories,
Yeah.
is that after the accident, immediately after the accident, my mother was so strong in her belief that, I already felt like we had been, given a gift, and, we were spared for some reason. But she said, your guardian angel protected all of you, and then that's why you were here. And she gave me this little gold angel pin to put in my car and keep there, moving forward.
Right.
And it was at that time, after she had given me that pin, right after that, I was sitting in my car, and I, daydreaming, or you can call it a vision or daydream or something, but I all of a sudden saw the story for my book in my head, very clear, like a movie. I just saw it all just very clear, like it had been something that I had watched.
Right.
And um, and at the time, one thing I failed to mention earlier is that I did write about a page, about a Word document page worth at that time. But as I said, I wasn't ready as an individual. There's different
Mhm.
things I was going through as an individual, and I wasn't ready to write it at that time. And so I never did anything with it. It didn't go beyond that, those few paragraphs.
Right.
And then last year, when I had written that blog and said, look, I'm going to use this as an opportunity, I I had been thinking about writing that book. These signs had been coming up for the past couple years, like, you should really write that book. You should really write that book. And I would moved along in my spiritual journey. And in 2019, and in the summer of 2019, my father passed away at the age of 96.
Oh,
And,
wow.
I was really close with him. And I remember, I had been thinking, hey, I really should write this book. And my father was a big reader for a big chunk of his life, right? And he loved to
Mhm.
read. And, until he got really old. But he had gone in the hospital just a couple months before he passed. And I went to visit him in the hospital in California. And I was sitting there just spending as much time with him as I could for the few days that I was there. And I remember telling him that I was going to write a book. And I told him about the story. I had never told him about the story or anything. And I shared the story with him. Honestly, I hadn't shared the story with anyone. And I shared the story with him. And it's funny because at the time I was going to call it 12 Hours in Heaven. And he said, well, they're not really in heaven, so you should call it Of Heaven. And I took his advice and named it 12 Hours of Heaven. But I remember when I told him that I was going to write this book, he was so proud, and he was so incredibly, um, he's just so excited
Right.
that he pressed the call button to have a nurse come in so he could tell her, because he wanted to share it with somebody.
Aw.
And I knew, after grieving, when he had passed and everything, I was like, I have to write this book. And so when I started writing, I decided, I dedicated the book to him. And my big inspiration was that, or maybe it's threefold. It was the car accident, leading to the inspiration for the story. It was my father, because the subtitle is Lessons for a Better World, and he
Mhm.
taught me many of the lessons that are in the book. Um, and and then I'd say the third inspiration was just what myself and everyone was going through last year.
Mhm.
At this point in time last year, where people were getting anxious, and I saw the kind of, that humanity was it seemed like it was heading in the wrong direction,
Right.
right? The people like us
Yep.
we hadn't had the awakening yet.
Right.
Right. And people were kind of heading in that dark place. Everyone was so fearful, and, masks and gloves and, just hand sanitizer and all this stuff, crazy stuff. And I was like, this is not good. Like, people need some hope. They need some inspiration, and that's what, and that really played an impact. All of those, had an impact in my writing.
Yeah. And what is the book? Because I read some. Is it a true story? Is it a series of stories? How is the book? What is the structure of the book?
So it's a
Now I'm
fictional
curious.
story. It's one fictional story.
Okay.
And it's about an angel that is sent down to heaven, and he gets trapped in an elevator with 10 individuals that are all from all walks of life, all totally different people, for 12 hours, for a period of 12 hours. And in the 12 hours that they're trapped in the elevator, he's able to help each of them through the biggest challenges of their lives. And those are the lessons that he teaches them. And then he learns some things about himself along the way, and he's on a journey himself.
That's amazing. I want
Yeah,
to read it. I
thank
want to
you.
read it.
I'd love you to. Thank you. I mean, it's been very well received, and it's inspired people. And that was my whole hope in getting it out there, is that it would provide some inspiration for others.
Yeah.
And I'll just add that shortly after finishing, these inspiration comes from all sources. But shortly after finishing the book, I had just finished a yoga class, and I'm sitting there afterward with my instructor, just chatting, and she, unknowing that I had written a book and unknowing what it was about, she was talking about some of the lessons. They were the theme for class, or some of the lessons in my book.
Right.
I think it was gratitude. She's talking about gratitude and being present, which are two of the lessons. And so I started sharing that with her. And then as we were chatting, instantly I had, inspiration to write 5 additional books, to write 5 additional, kind of in a series. And so I just started writing the second one, which is actually a follow-up to the first one, which, hopefully will come out later this year.
Yeah.
If all goes well.
That's awesome. I thought you were going to tell me that she was using these lessons, and then I thought she was going to say that she read the book unknowingly, that it was like you, because I was going to be like, that is insane. But
no, that would have been a great story. But what she did tell me is that she did get the book as soon as it came out, and she started using the lessons with her children to impart those lessons on them, and they used each lesson as a theme for a week, that they were going to do that for each week, which that was really cool to hear.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And where can people get your book at?
So it's on all the usual platforms. It's on Amazon in Kindle and paperback versions on Amazon. You can go to Goodreads or Ingram Spark or Google or any of those other places. If you search the whole title, 12 Hours of Heaven, Lessons for a Better World, it should pop up on Google, but for Amazon for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the surprise that I told you about, that I wasn't going to originally tell you about before, because I didn't want you to be able to think about it. And
okay.
I have never done this before with any of my guests, but I promise you it's not that crazy.
Ooh, I feel special. Thank you.
I know. I wanted to try something different. And I feel like you've definitely done a lot of like public speaking. So I'm like, okay, I can kind of test him a little bit.
Okay. No pressure.
But I am going to ask you a series of questions, and I want you to give me your answer. And here is the most important part: is your answer in 3 words or less.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
Okay. I better get a drink here.
And it's
some water before we do that. All right.
And it's whatever comes to mind. I told my boyfriend about this, and he's like, what if he's not prepared? I said, well, that's kind of the whole point, because it's kind of like this rapid fire.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm all for it.
Okay. So the first question is if you could only do one thing every day for the rest of your life to help you stay in a positive mindset, what would it be?
You gave me an easy one to start out with, at
I
least for
know,
me.
see?
And serve others.
There you go. All right. And what is the best advice you have ever been given?
To love unconditionally.
See, you're good at this. What gets you excited about life?
Opportunity.
There you go. And what can you do today that you were not capable of a year ago?
Hmm. Amplify my voice.
See, you're good at this. And this one I feel is easy cuz well, you'll see why. But if you had the opportunity to get a message across to a large group of people, what would your message be?
To spread positive change.
There we go.
You can take the two off, then it's three
Yeah.
words.
And what do we all have in common besides our genes that makes us human?
Our vulnerabilities.
Yes. See, these are great. What is the one thing you would like most? Hang on. What is the one thing you would most like to change about the world?
I'm trying to get this down to three words. I know what I want to say, but I need to get it into three words or less.
You can just speak like a baby.
Believing in yourself.
Yes. Where do you find inspiration?
Everywhere.
If we learn from our mistakes, why are we always so afraid to make a mistake?
Again, I have the answer. I'm trying to paraphrase it.
I should have made it a sentence. I'll give you a sentence.
Can't see the silver lining.
There we go. And this is this is my last question for the rapid fire. But what do you love most about yourself?
What I'm doing now.
There you go. Okay, so I just have two last questions for you. So, with everything that you do in terms of coaching and your books, where can people find out if they want to find out more about you and your coaching and in any of your services that you have?
The best place, and thank you for asking that, Melissa. The best place would be my website, isparkchange.com. There's a coaching tab. There's information about me and my background and a blog, and there will be links to various articles I've written, different podcasts, things like that.
Yeah,
So we can find out all about it.
awesome. Thank you. All right, and my very last question that I always ask all of my guests is, Rick, what does the bright side of life mean to you?
So I feel like I've kind of answered that in many different ways in our conversation, but I'd say the bright side of life is looking for the opportunities in everything.
Yes, that is perfect. Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on here today to share your story. And I just want to thank you for everything that you are doing. I know that you are giving people opportunities and you are helping people, and you just want to go out there and do all these different acts of kindness just to change the world one small act at a time. So thank you so much for what you do and for coming on here today.
Thank you very much, Melissa. It's been a pleasure, and it's been really fun too. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I enjoyed those questions too at the end. That was really fun. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, you are so welcome. All right. And we are going to end the broadcast here. So, for all of you guys that are on here, I just want to say thank you very, very much for coming on here. And this will eventually become a podcast episode, but I wanted to do it live here for anybody that wanted to check it out. So, thank you. And we will see you guys later.